Good.
Hello, you're watching Six News on the Hour. I'm Leonardo Puglisi. The top stories we're following right now. Less than 24 hours to go until polls close in the Victorian state election, with almost all indications pointing to a reduced Labor majority or minority government. Greens and independents likely to pick up seats, while the coalition is facing an uphill battle to form government at all. Both Dan Andrews and Matthew Guy's teams now ghosting Six News as we ask for interviews so you get to see them face the tough questions. Minor parties now a chance to hold a large number of seats in the upper house as Victoria gets ready to decide. Good evening on this Friday evening. Thank you so much for tuning into Six News Late as we continue our coverage of the Victorian election, which is now about 21 hours away from polls closing. It has been an extraordinary campaign, not just this month either, with 23 registered parties, dozens of candidates, hundreds of candidates really, a record in fact across both houses, and promises from the leaders. But what could happen if there's a minority government? Who are the parties at play? And of course, what could the upper house look like? Group voting tickets, that could provide some chaos in terms of parties with a tiny percentage actually getting in. Six News tried to speak to every single party running in this election. As it stands, the Nationals attempted to get us an interview but were unable to do so, which we understand. However, the New Democrats have repeatedly ignored us. Every other party has spoken to us on air at least once. In terms of the leaders, Samantha Ratnam, Greens leader, spoke to us last month. The UAP leader, Jeff Shaw, has also spoken to us, and Democratic Labor MP Bernie Finn, as you're about to see, has also spoken to Six News. However, Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews, after an initial positive response from his team appears to have ghosted us and not responded to our further requests. The opposition leader, Matthew Guy's team, appeared to ghost us entirely, never got a proper response there. So unfortunately, it does not look like we are able to ask the tough questions on behalf of you and get you to see those answers from the leaders unedited, uncensored. However, we thank all the candidates that have come on so far. Got some on for you tonight. And of course, we thank especially the Labor and Liberal candidates who have made the time to come on. So tonight, as we mentioned, lots in terms of the crossbench happening right now. One of the crossbench MPs was not even elected as such. Liberal MP Bernie Finn became Democratic Labor Party MP Bernie Finn. He's in the Western Metro region, one of three crossbench MPs there. He's aiming to retain his seat for the DLP. Six News spoke to him about why he made the move, what he makes about Adam Somyurek joining the party, and his party's abbreviation on the ballot paper. Spoke to him a little earlier. Bernie Finn, welcome to Six News.
A very great pleasure, Leo. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. So look, let's go back to what happened a few months ago. Obviously, you're out of the Liberals, you're an independent for a few days, then you joined the DLP. Now, I know you had been the DLP for quite a while before you joined the Libs back in the day, but I know there had also been some speculation you were considering other parties. One name that was thrown around a lot was Family First. Was that ever possible, or had you always set your minds on the DLP once you were out of
Well,
the
I had been approached, Leo, I'd been approached by either before or after I was thrown out of the Libs. I was approached by 8 other parties. But in considering all of those, I took a number of things obviously into consideration. But at the end of the day, there was really only one party that I thought stacked up, and that is the DLP, and I'm very pleased that I made that decision because I have not enjoyed politics so much for a very, very long time, I can tell you. They're a great crew.
Now, yeah, look, the DLP's obviously been around for quite a while when you look at some of the other minor parties. I mean, there's ones that are only a few weeks old, really, running in this election. But it's you look at the history and it's kind of varied. You've gone from obviously, pretty strong force way back in like the 50s and 60s, kind of died off at one point. Branches were gone, but then in Victoria, you've actually maintained a pretty steady presence there. You had an MP a while back, and then also we've got you now. And consistently, you've been one of those major minor party votes when you look at all those other minor parties going through. How do you think you're actually going to go this election, given obviously you do have representation in yourself, but you haven't had anyone elected under your party for a few years?
Well, we had a member in the last parliament. That was, of course, Rachel Carleen Jenkins, who represented Western Metropolitan Region, which is the area that I do. So I know Rachel very well. And of course, there's me in this parliament. Peter Kavanagh was a member back in Western Victoria in days of yore, in the last decade, or the decade before, in fact. And of course, we had John Madigan, who was a senator. But what really excites me about what's happening now is the fact that I have a good friend and a colleague across the aisle, Adam Somyurek, who is joining me as the DLP candidate for Northern Metropolitan Region. And between the two of us, I think we will both be elected. And I think there's a possibility of perhaps even one or two others that might come with us. But I'm fairly confident that we will be elected. And between the two of us, we will give voice to some real concerns about real issues that affect real people. And that surely is what MPs should be doing.
Adam's announcement came as a bit of a shock, given not only had most indications, most people had seemed to indicate he wasn't running, but also the fact he literally did resign from Parliament effective immediately, just a few days before. Was this always in the works, or were you personally surprised by his choice?
I was very surprised. I had given up on. I had been at Adam for quite some time. I had been cajoling him, begging him, pleading with him, or whatever you want to do, whatever you want to call it, for quite some time. And he had indicated to me that wasn't going to happen, and I'd accepted that. And when he resigned from Parliament, I said, oh, well, that's that then. Then one Saturday night, a couple of weeks ago, he rang me and said, mate, is that offer still on? And I said, you bet it is. And we started talking, and obviously the decision was announced a little while after that. So it's great to have Adam on board. He's a solid citizen and a good man.
I read how your party announced his announcement that he was coming back. It's one line, I think, was that the people of his electorate are relieved they have the opportunity to have him representing them again. How is that possible when he's not even running in the same seat as his
well, look, I have to say I didn't actually see that, but that obviously is a mistake from somebody, and I'll have to look that up and have severe words with them. But obviously Adam is running for Northern Metropolitan and has a strong connection with that area. In fact, when he first came to Australia, Broadmeadows was his first port of call. So he has a very strong connection with the north of Melbourne right from day one.
Gotcha. Now, look, as I mentioned at the start, there are so many parties running this year. We have 23 registered parties. We have another couple that are endorsing independents or have independents affiliated with them. And there's a lot of parties that some, whether that's in the media or online, seem to kind of lump in a group, yourself included, as son of the right-wing freedom parties. People use that label often. What separates you from other kind of similar-ish parties like, let's say, Family First or the UAP or One Nation?
Well, in a lot of ways, certainly Family First, there's not a great deal of difference between Family First and the DLP. I suppose the Family First is more religiously inclined, if I could say that. We are more of a secular party, but I have no objection to people of faith being involved, because freedom of religion, I believe, is a very important thing in society, and one that we will fight and defend always, every time. One Nation is a different kettle of fish altogether. It barely exists in Victoria, although it's giving it a red hot go at the moment. But the DLP is a conservative Labor Party. It believes in workers. It believes in small business. It believes in traditional families. And these are issues that I think a lot of people in the suburbs and indeed in regional towns and right through country Victoria are really affected by.
Gotcha. Now, look, when we look at the ballot papers, and maybe not me personally, I'm a few years off that, but we see it in both the upper and lower house, and you look for a DLP candidate, and there are quite a few in the lower house. But I note the abbreviation, it's Labor DLP.
Yep.
Is it just an attempt to gain votes off Labor? Like, what's the point?
No, not at all. Not at all. We are in Victoria. We are the real Labor Party, and that is declared by the Supreme Court of Victoria back in, I think it was 1958. And when the DLP was given all the ALP's records and was declared the official Labor Party. So when we say that we are Labor, we are real Labor. We are the Labor Party that your grandparents might have voted for. Your great-grandparents might have voted for. We are the real Labor Party. We're not the left-wing Labor Party. We're not the Daniel Andrews Labor Party, but we are the Labor Party that actually cares about workers and families. It's not a cheap stunt. We are declaring ourselves what we are. We are the real Labor Party.
Yeah, but why can't you just use Democratic Labor as the abbreviation instead of putting Labor first? I appreciate, you might be based on those court records, and I'll have to check them out. I love niche political history.
Yeah, have a look.
But what's the purpose of when you the first word in your name is not Labor, it's Democratic, and then it's Labor?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you go back to 1955, in fact, the DLP, when it first began, was the anti-communist Labor Party. And that was for the first 2 years, and it became the DLP after the DLP was formed in Queensland from a similar split up there in the ALP. Why the word Labor was put in happened before obviously I rejoined the party. So I'm not exactly sure why that has happened, but I assume, as I say to you, that is because we want to reassert ourselves as the real Labor Party, who we are, and let people know exactly what they're voting for.
Bernie Finn there, Democratic Labor MP, member for the Western Metropolitan Region, speaking to 6 News earlier about a wide-ranging thing. And yeah, you can see that acronym, Democratic Labor. It's evident on the ballot papers, and you'll continue to see that evident in their name too. But yeah, really interesting. Let us know your thoughts on that. Should be interesting whether the DLP gets in. They are working, by the way, for those interested on the record, they are working with Glenn Drury. That could benefit them again. Possibly Adam Somyurek getting. I don't know. It's it's a red hot contest in Northern Metro, but also Western Metro as well. Meanwhile, speaking of minor parties and independents, Jane Agatone has described herself as a real, not teal, independent candidate. She's running in Mornington when there is a Climate 200 back teal in Dr. Kate Lardner. Agatone ran for the council there in 2020. At the time it was reported she was an active Liberal member. In terms of those ongoing affiliations, well, I asked her about that. Take a look. You were reported, though, as an active Liberal member as early as 2 years, or as late as 2 years ago. Are you now?
I have not renewed my membership, and to be honest with you, I have not been active at all since 2019 federal election. I really enjoyed working on that election. I think it was a tight race, and it was exciting and it was fun. Mostly I got involved because as an accountant, as a ratepayer, I found Bill Shorten's policies being completely disastrous for myself personally and for my clients. And when you have skin in the game, this is where you go and mend the booze and you get involved, which is ultimately what I've done. I don't think I've been to any events or been involved otherwise since then. We were in lockdown since March 2020, and I don't think there was a lot happening anyway.
Gotcha. So you haven't been active much since 2019, but in terms of membership actually being not renewed, when was that?
The renewals were in March, I believe, and like I said, I haven't been active, and I haven't renewed. And I think a lot of people that I'm connected with locally, they're leaving political parties in droves because we all are ultimately very, very disappointed in the major parties, and we feel like they're not aligned with values of the everyday people and everyday residents, and I can no longer financially support something that I don't believe in.
Gotcha. Now, look, you only announced your candidacy fairly recently. We had Kate Lardner announce hers.
Precisely 7 days ago.
Yeah, well, look, we had Kate Lardner announce hers a while back. So do you reckon you actually have a decent shot here?
Look, I am not in the business of making predictions, but I'll give you an example of last time I ran as an independent in a local government election, which was in hard lockdown. We couldn't even letterbox the materials. That was deemed inappropriate as per government regulations. So it was purely online-based campaign. I had no money, I had no name recognition, and I've previously never had social media. In that particular election, I achieved, I believe, 23.8% of the primary vote and 28% when the preferences were counted, which for a political amateur, I believe is a pretty good result. So again, I'm running a very tight ship. I am going to put some signage up, but obviously I don't have climate billionaires throwing money at me. So we'll see how we go, but I feel like I have to do something because the situation that we found ourselves in can no longer continue. It's not sustainable. This government cannot continue.
So wait, you were running as an independent in the local government election while also being a Liberal member, is that right?
Correct. That would have been in 2020 during lockdown. So I was a member at the time, but the party, neither Liberal nor Labor nor Greens, do endorse or finance local government candidates.
I think the Greens do, but yeah.
Perhaps, but I am saddened to report that I received no support, financial or otherwise, at the time.
Jane Agatone there, quote unquote, real, not teal independent candidate for the lower house seat in Mornington, when we do have teal independent Dr. Kate Lardner contesting that seat, and we'll be continuing to follow those results for you live tomorrow night. Well, going back to some of the minor parties right now, there are quite a few, as we mentioned before, 23 registered parties total running in this election, quite a few of them only in the upper house. The Health Australia Party is one of them. Now, they've been around for a few years, initially coming off the old Natural Medicine Party. One of the party's, co-founders and directors, executives and candidates is Isaac Golden, Dr. Isaac Golden, who is running in, off the top of my head, Western Metro. The party has been described by some as anti-vax. They deny that label, but also they faced controversy recently for an attempt to change their name to, quote-unquote, the Coalition for Freedom, Prosperity, Health. The proposed abbreviation you would have seen on the ballot paper, the Coalition. I spoke to Dr. Isaac Golden a little earlier. Health Australia Party, there has not ever been parliamentary representation.
No.
Do you think you've got a chance now?
Look, the only chance we have is in the upper house. In the lower house, unless one is a celebrity candidate, then unless you're one of the four majors, it's a real struggle. But in the upper house, because Victoria, thank God, still has the old preferencing system, it gives small parties like ours a chance. And to be quite honest with you, I think that's a wonderful thing, because democracy is stronger when you have a range of different voices in Parliament rather than just the four majors repeating what we've heard them say for years.
Can I just ask on that point, though, if you don't have a chance in the lower house, and I think that is fair, why are you running lower house candidates then?
Oh, there's a few people who wanted to run. We would run a candidate in every seat if we had someone in every seat who wanted to run. So, it's certainly possible. Now, my power has just gone out. Can you still see me okay?
I can see you fine. Oh, this is absolutely going in our end of year Christmas tape. But no, I can hear you. I can see you. We got a storm over us. But if you had any more with that answer, go ahead. If not, I'll ask.
Yeah, no. Well, I live in the bush, so our internet depends on electricity and a few other things. It's not plugged in to the wires.
Our look, then again, our Melbourne one isn't that good either. The other thing I was going to mention there, though, and I will get back to the upper house in a second, though, but there are, as I'm sure you're aware, so many minor parties running this election. Yep. 23 parties total registered. There are a number of other parties who are endorsing candidates, or there are independent candidates who are affiliated with some minor parties. Yep. So in reality, it's almost 30. Is there something that makes the Health Australia Party stand out when you compare it to, again, the other, wide range of parties we're seeing?
Yeah, well, I mean, whether it's the upper house or the lower house, the thing that differentiates the Health Australia Party is our expertise in certain areas. Now, obviously, health is one. Now, a lot of talk about freedom. In fact, we have a 3-word little summary of our party for this election. It's freedom, prosperity, health. But let me deal with the health one last. With health, we don't look at health just as being healthy people. We have 5 pillars, and we have since 2015. So healthy people, healthy environment, healthy economy, healthy democracy, healthy society. If you don't have health in those whole 5, then unfortunately you don't have a healthy country. And what differentiates us is that we're a very much a centre party. We're not left wing, we're not right wing, but we know a lot about what's wrong with our health system. Right from the start, we've pointed out the corrupting influence of the international pharmaceutical drug cartels on the health system, not only in Australia, but around the world. But in terms of in Australia, which is what we're talking about, and Victoria in particular, we're the only minor party who really, really understands this and has a solution, has an idea that we can share with others to actually correct this imbalance. I don't know if you knew, Leo, but we have a wonderful emergency medical system, but we have one of the highest rates of chronic illness in the world. And so people who say, you know, we've got a world-leading health system, yeah, for one part of it, but not for all of it. And that's what we need to do. The economy and the health, of course, of people are totally interacted. And when we saw the Treasurer's budget speech a week or so ago, and you looked at his graphs, the health budget is blowing out. And it will continue to get worse and worse, particularly because of the NDIS being added in. We need to actually deal with health, not by throwing huge amounts of money at the system, but by correcting what's wrong, by correcting what has led to this blowout in chronic illness. So that's the major differentiating factor. But in terms of freedom and prosperity, well, freedom, we've been calling for honesty and openness in research. And of course, over the last few years, we've been calling for democracy is a key to our whole society. Thousands and thousands of men and women have died fighting for our democracy, but it's being eroded. And in terms of prosperity, we believe that this is really a lucky country. Now, that used to be its title years and years ago. It's not anymore, because the distribution of wealth in the country has become very skewed. And of course, now that we're facing all these cost of living pressures, it means people at the lower end of the graph are really struggling with so many things in their expenditure, not just vegetables and food to put on the table, but rent is becoming crippling for many families. But that shouldn't be the case. We should be really, really prosperous for everyone, for every Australian. And that's the other thing which is a priority of ours.
Yeah, you mentioned the slogan there, freedom, prosperity, health, which, you know, it's on your website, it's on your socials,
Yep.
and it's something you've been really pushing. You did try to change your name to that. You tried to change the Health Australia
Yeah.
Party name to the Coalition for Freedom, Prosperity, Health. The
Correct.
proposed abbreviation being the Coalition. Isn't that a bit misleading to call yourselves, or want to call yourselves, the Coalition?
There's no registered political party called the Coalition. And the bottom line is, we called ourselves the Coalition for Freedom, Prosperity and Health is because we brought together a number of different groups to make what we're standing for now happen. So the coalition was just a descriptive word. And in terms of the abbreviation, it was just the first 2 words of the name. But instead, we realized that we were going to be contested in court, that this would have held everything up until probably after the election was over. And we couldn't be left in limbo. So we decided, okay, we'll cancel that. We'll go back to the Health Australia Party, and we'll, instead of just putting HAP as an abbreviation on the ballot papers, we'll put the full name of the party.
Yeah, I accept that, you know, there is no registered party with that name, but I think when people think of the coalition, they do think of two parties, and only two parties there in Victoria, the Liberals and the Nationals. You can surely see where confusion would have come from if you did eventually have that name on the ballot paper.
Well, you have the Democratic Labor Party, you have the Liberal Democrats. There's a whole lot of things like that people are negotiating when it comes to names, Leo. Anyway, the bottom line is we're not running under that name, and we're running as the Health Australia Party.
Dr. Isaac Golden there, Health Australia Party, running in this state election as a number of Health Australia Party candidates speaking to just at the end there about their proposal that has not gone ahead to change their name to the Coalition for Freedom, Prosperity, Health. Based on some of those comments about potentially scrapping until after the election, you have to wonder whether they're actually going to, do that after the election. What would the coalition say about that? And I mean the Liberals and Nationals there. But anyway, there's, still a lot going on with this Victorian election right now. We saw the VEC today say that a record number of people have voted early, according to the VEC. By the end of Thursday, 1,906,930 people cast their votes. That's already significantly more than 1,648,883 who voted early back in 2018. So polls close again 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time, so local time, 5:30 tomorrow South Australian time, and 3 in the West, but 6 p.m. local time tomorrow. They open at 8 a.m. Now, 6 News will be on the ground all day as we, follow this campaign for you, really closely. But I guess the main thing to kind of, mention here is the fact that, there are a number of key seats that really look like they are going to be the toss-up ones. You look at seats where it could be a three-way contest. Hawthorn, for example, Liberal incumbent, former Liberal, Labor incumbent, former Liberal MP who was contesting again, that being John Pasuto, until independent Melissa Lowe. You look at seats like Melton, where you've got an independent challenger, but also seats the Greens could pick up. They could pick up to 3, potentially Northcote, Albert Park, and Richmond. Now, we've got an exclusive story on the website right now, SIXNewsAU.com, about the seat of Richmond. Labor sending out leaflets in the exact same style as the Liberals campaign stuff, with the same logo, same Liberal logo, same Liberal colours. Why are they doing that? Well, you've got to read that story, SIXNewsAU.com. But also, the Liberals, it looks like they're aiming to pick up a few seats like Box Hill, potentially Nepean, and then they're also a chance of actually losing some seats, we should point out. Kew, for example, Caulfield as well. Caulfield could be lost to the ALP here, not the Teal challenger there. The ALP could pick it up, even though, they might lose government after this election. It's not unheard of for that to happen. I think it happened federally. We had Craig Kelly's old seat picked up by the Liberals, but again, it was, Liberal at the election before that. So it's really looking like it's going to come down to a few key seats here. The predictions seem to be Labor majority reduced or Labor minority. Additionally, in terms of that, if the coalition did manage to get into government, the reality is, or the more likely element here is that they would have to get in via minority. Problem is the other crossbenchers, your Teals, your Greens, they may end up going with Labor over the Liberals, and Labor might get the first pick in terms of negotiations as well. So coalition majority seems unlikely based on the bookies. And in regards to Dan Andrews' seat, well, there's a lot of speculation about whether he could lose it. Obviously, sitting Premier losing their seat, very rare. Last time it happened, 2015 Queensland, Campbell Newman. He was a one-term Premier. Fun fact, the entire time he spent in the Queensland Parliament, he was the Premier. It's unheard of in the state, but that's, Campbell Newman for you. So we're going to keep following those results for you. We are live from 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. The moment polls close tomorrow night. We'll be going all night till, at the least midnight and possibly into the early hours of the morning, because we could have counting and results coming in forever. But we will do that for you. We will definitely make sure we bring you all the analysis you need to see. On the panel, 6 News law and government editor and host of Between Parks Place and Capitol Hill, which has a new episode on Spotify and Apple right now, Stuart Jeffrey, and also political commentator, host of the Matthew Hayne Show, Matthew Hayne, plus reports from our team, including political editor Roman McKinnon and national reporter Austin Pollock, and hoping across to some guests too. Plus, we'll be reading out your comments live as they come in. We're actually not just going to display them on screen. We're actually going to read to them. We're going to interact. We're going to want to hear what you say. We're going to be reading them out 24/7 throughout the night and answering your questions as they come in, because there is a lot to unpack in this election. We'll be focusing in the upper house as well too, even though that's not where government is formed. Results could be really interesting there, so we'll keep following that for you. But it is just approaching 9:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. That is Six News for this hour. There is more news 24/7 on our website, SIXNewsAU.com, and on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Lit. Just search 6NewsAU to find us. We'll be back from 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time tomorrow night for election night. Victoria decides. For now, though, I'm Leonardo Puglisi. Have a great night.